Okay, Georgia Brammer, thank you so much for taking the time to be here, and thank you so much for also sponsoring the Limitless equation. I am so pleased to have you on board. When there was talk of Innovid becoming a sponsor, for me that was so exciting because I was like, that means Georgia's involved, and I just think you are such a fierce, authentic leader. So it was no surprise to me that authenticity came up as your superpower, and that's what we're going to be diving into today. I just want to kick off. Why was it so important for you to be part of this and sponsor this program?
I definitely wanted to sponsor it when I heard about the podcast. Obviously, I'm a female leader, but I get to work with some of the most fearless ladies in the marketing and advertising industry. And I think we do deserve a platform for people in our industry to celebrate each other's success, but also for, I think, the participants on the podcast to actually take a moment and celebrate themselves as well. I know you speak a lot about self-belief and imposter syndrome. So I think it's critical that we have a platform that allows us to do that. And yeah, it's been my pleasure to get involved, and thank you for initiating it.
Amazing. How are you feeling today? How are you feeling about celebrating yourself?
Look, I'm a little nervous. Authenticity, you might regret having me on. Am I allowed to swear?
You absolutely are.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure what I did to you in the past. You didn't give me any pre-read questions. So we're just going to let this one rip and see what comes, I think.
And I think that's what authenticity is all about. Once I actually had someone, I was in a session, I was delivering some mental health first aid training. And at the end, someone said, we talk about the importance of being authentic. Like at the end of the session, I go, look, I can give you all the tools, I can give you all the systems, but at the end of the day, authenticity is the most important thing, because if you're not being genuine with someone, you're not going to relax them, you're not going to make them feel good, and you're not going to get the outcome of that conversation that you want. And I had someone at the end raise their virtual hand, it was on a Zoom call, and said, Chloe, can I just ask, how do you be authentic? It was such a hard question to answer. I'm going to ask it to you because I laugh when they ask me. But as Little Miss Authentic, let's dive into that.
It's a really actually quite a difficult question. It's one of those rudimentary questions, isn't it, that actually really stumps you. I think it's taken time for me to become authentic, and no doubt we'll get into that. I think I appreciate now at the stage of my career that I'm not going to be everyone's cup of tea. But in order to do well at my job, to get satisfaction, to also have a close knit and successful team around me, I think authenticity is really important. And that means not just being likable, not just being funny, it's not just blazers, blow dries and manicures. It actually is about showing the team your insecurities, your faults, not to the degree in which it creates anxiety amongst your clients and team, but it's important to actually show earnest feelings and considerations that go into big decisions, for example. And I think that's really critical to building a great career and a great team and a network. So I think it does take bravery to start to unfold some of those more honest elements of yourself. But I think it's also about having ownership of some of those unique elements of your personality and skill set. And I guess I'm a crazy cat, so that there's certainly a element of that with me that the team has learned to hopefully appreciate.
I love that. You've almost given me a talk track for what we're going to go through, right? Because you mentioned at the beginning around you haven't always been authentic. So let's start there.
Yeah.
And then let's take everyone on a journey of how we end on how you became authentic and how that shows up
Yeah.
today. Let's kick into it.
Yeah,
Let's go deep.
sure.
Let's
Well,
go deep with a crazy
I
cat.
well, I guess if we go back to little Georgia, at university, I'd come out of school probably believe it or not, I was quite demure at school, and I was quite shy. I was a bit of a bookworm, really concentrated on doing my best at school, and grades was obviously a big component of that. coming out of school, and I went to like, quite I guess, a silver spoon private school where you're not exposed to a great deal. Coming out to university was a big challenge for me, and trying to become more familiar with myself outside of school was a big turning point, I think, for me growing up. Getting out of that habit of being perfect was definitely a challenge. It wasn't a case of, getting A's or 90 and above, what have you. I think that they were fairly formative years for me, and I'm being frank and authentic and honest. I came to terms with the fact that I had anxiety, and that ultimately developed into depression, which I've come to terms with. But um, it was a big turning point, I think, for me in terms of getting to grips with not being perfect. And I think I've mentioned to you when we first met, probably had a rosé in hand. Um, I developed sort of like even ways at university to go between lecture and tutorial where I could actually go into a bathroom and make sure that my hair was perfect, my face was perfect, because people were looking at me as I walked along, and there was fear of obviously not being perfect in this new world. Um, the irony was that that obviously started to detract from my university success. But I think I was thinking actually this morning, a better irony is when I first interviewed at Flash Talking, now Innovid, 12 years ago, uh, the boss at the time, after I passed probation, told me that I had lipstick on my teeth the entire interview. So that was very generous of him to tell me that after. But the irony of not being perfect in a life-changing interview, having been here 12 years now, I think it says a lot about my journey.
Mm. And anxiety and depression looks different for different people. And I know you were quite keen to share some more on that to
Hmm.
kind of help others who may be struggling in that space.
Definitely. I think that was a big piece for me as I was coming to grips with feeling like that, because it's not a physical ailment. At times, I just want a broken bone, for instance. Like you're dealing with these types of emotions that are new to you. So I think there's kind of two stages of it. First is actually just seeing I didn't have anyone to look up to back when I was in my early 20s. I don't think there was necessarily as many people advocating and speaking openly about mental health. And so I remember when I did go and seek help at the doctors, I remember very distinctly this doctor ringing someone and saying, "You wouldn't believe it looking at her, but she's got depression and
Mm.
anxiety, perfectionist behavior, what have you." And that really stuck with me, that like, why was it a bad thing? Did I need to sort of drag myself into the into the GP without makeup, in my tracky dacks? Um, and so that was critical, just actually seeing someone else similar to me. But I think as I have grown up in my career, it's become more obvious, and obviously I've developed, and it's all manageable and part of life now. But I am very conscious that we don't often see female leaders or leaders in general in our industry necessarily openly talking about their own experiences. So that's always been something that I have been quite open about, even just thinking about with my team here in APAC, about being authentic, about being anxious about certain things or not having a good day, um, so that they are familiar with the concept that you can have mental health struggles but still be successful in your career is really critical. And also not be disingenuous that I'm perfect and it's a breeze to do this job every day. I think it's important for them to acknowledge everyone's struggles and, day-to-day challenges. So it's definitely been a growth journey, but a passion project, because I feel very fortunate in what I have achieved. And in some ways, I'm sure we'll get onto it. In some ways, I think it's put me in better stead for the challenges of running a company out in Asia Pacific. It makes me a lot braver. I have a really good internal dialogue with myself. I know you've given me feedback on not having a therapist, but the internal G's pretty fucking relentless. So, yeah, I think they're really important pieces for me.
And I think just on that comment around feedback on a therapist, I am just such a personal advocate of like, I believe therapy's for the elite. Like, I believe that there's such a stigma around seeing a psychologist, seeing a therapist, and I feel like there is so much to be learned from them that, yeah, I probably do over preach on that in places to people, because I'm just like, I just think it's game changing. I think for many people, they don't necessarily find the right one.
Yeah.
There's lots of, I've heard so many stories about people going to see several different people and it's not helped them.
Yes.
I think the stat is something, and don't quote me on this, but something like it can take up to 8 different therapists to find one that works for you.
I think I probably tried about 4, and I just kind of gave up on it. I mean, I did also decide to move to London, and that was a really good shake up. That was good, and it was like threw me into the deep end. But I did, like, from those individual sessions, like, you can take snippets. I mean, there was one horrific one that I think I left crying. She had a horrible couch, and she just was not my vibe. But I think it is, yeah, really critical to keep trying, and perhaps I should have, but I did take snippets. Like, I know cognitive behavioral therapy, I kind of do it in my own little way, of like educating myself on how to go forward. And I think that is a big foundation for how I carry myself. I often start walking before I can actually become too anxious or overthink a situation. And I mean, I guess an example of how I speak to myself is my dad's pool, the heat is gone. It's been a few years now. So I've had to really, when I go back to the parents, diving into that pool, I can say to myself, you're not going to die from the cold, G. So let's just go. So I can use those same kind of mechanisms during the day of like, what's the worst that's going to happen? Going into a boardroom in, say, Asia, where it's, perhaps particularly in ad tech, more heavily male skewed, I could sit outside and, not go in, not want to go in, get myself in a real tiz. But, I can speak to myself and use that methodology of like, what's the worst that can happen? The worst could be that I actually show them up and show them that I know tech. And so I've really used that mechanism not only just for mental health, but in my day-to-day of overcoming some of the challenges in my leadership role.
Melissa Doyle, when Melissa Doyle came on, she said, I think to myself, what's the worst that can happen? Because my brain naturally goes there. And then I ask myself the question, what's the best that could happen? And I really liked that. And I think what you're communicating here is that it's all about authenticity, right? And it's about working out what works best for you. Like, I'm psychologist advocate 101, like I am all about that. And for you, you said that that's not necessarily the right thing for me. And I think tying that back to authenticity, it's about finding what's going to work best for us. And I think that's a really important message for people. You spoke about wishing you had a broken bone, and I could not relate to that more in terms of how much easier it is to explain to people physical illness and how much more people understand that as opposed to mental illness. My trigger warning again here, probably need to put a picture. I will put a trigger warning at the beginning of all of this episode, but my dad has cancer and my mum suffers from very bad mental illness. And it was happening around the same time. They both kind of got diagnosed. And everyone would always say to me, how's your dad? And dad was doing really well, getting himself to work, had a level of resilience around it. No one ever really asked me how mum was at that particular time, because it wasn't when we spoke about mental illness very much in this industry and in this country. But mum was the one that kept me awake at night. Mum was the one that I worried about constantly. And it was just so, it was almost like a fascinating case study of life, of going, people understand what dad's going through and people don't understand what mum's going through. So they shy away from it. And I think your analogy of like a broken bone would be so much easier. I can really feel
You can
you when
see
you
it,
say
can't
that.
you? You can sign a cast, you can like
Mm,
put a pin in it and fix it. Whereas it's not a visible illness and it doesn't have really obvious signs. It's also really hard for a lot of people to actually open up and talk about it. That's
mm,
probably one of the most difficult elements, isn't it? So not only you can't necessarily see it, obviously there's scenarios where, you know, you want to lock yourself in the room and sleep all day. That's like a symptom, I guess, that's visible. But that heartache and that checking in and, you know, even thinking about Are You Okay Day and what have you, it's a really great initiative that it is a sentiment to remind us to go in and check in on everyone. But in the throes of day to day, it can be quite easy when you're not seeing physical symptoms to forget to check in on people.
yeah, absolutely. I think Are You Okay Day is a great initiative. I've been trying to advocate for a while for an Am I Okay Day, because I think there's an element of like, also, how do we check in on ourselves? Like, how do we get really good at kind of going, hey, I'm not okay, and what do
Yeah.
I do then? And I think I love the movement around Are You Okay Day, and I'd love to add that extra
I
layer.
think it's a great idea. I mean, my poor team. I promise I'm not really chaotic in the office, but in front of a couple of them, I have had moments where I'll have like a frustrated cry, and I think it's really important. Like boys and girls, I should say men and women. Sorry, team. I say it affectionately, but I think it's really important for them to witness that like, you know, again, you're not coming in and every decision is really easy, that you're not being screwed over certain days, what have you. So I think it's really critical to again have that authenticity, that every day isn't like a winning day, that I can also have my faults and my concerns and my insecurities. And I think it forms a safer space for them to have those conversations, hopefully, and amongst the team. Yeah, I think that's really important. But it is important to also take days and also be able to say that to your team when you do just need a, what do they say, doona days, just like a little day to yourself. It's amazing what a day of just sitting at home getting your washing done can do, rather than having to make up some elaborate illness or cold or flu, you know, like just actually own it, that you need a bit of mental clarity.
Yeah, and when it comes to burnout, right, we see that, you know, people just push themselves and push themselves and push themselves, and then they might end up needing a much longer extended period of time off. Whereas, as if we did get better at kind of asking ourselves that question, am I okay? Checking in with myself. And I'm saying this from a burnout point of view, right?
Yeah.
Mental illness is a completely different kind of situation. I wouldn't like to comment on that. I'm not qualified.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to burnout, we push and push and push, and then people need extended periods, or, you know, the body keeps the score. The body will force us to be physically ill if we don't look after
Yeah.
ourselves mentally. And that's what I think is such a huge part of what you're saying. Like, we need to make sure that people are checking in with themselves
Yeah.
and taking those rest days when they need them, instead of pushing through and then potentially needing a lot
Yeah.
longer off.
And also, I think an element of burnout that I have, I mean, I still have some of my oldest colleagues saying this to me. I think part of like my challenge with perfectionism, I know in previous podcasts you've spoken a lot about self belief. I would say that I have fairly strong self belief. I think my challenge is around what is enough. And I think that has put me in a stronger disposition to burn out, because I am constantly not wanting to just be perfect, but to do 110%. And I think sometimes, again, that self check in needs to be self recognition of like what you're doing is fantastic. It's okay. Like, I mightn't have worked 12 hours today, but I did, a great 7 hours. So it's actually training yourself on that side of perfectionism, I think, has been really important. And I mean, I've got this tremendous gentleman in my team, and quite often he takes forever to send emails. I'm doing his review right now, but he'll take forever sending emails because he wants the email to be perfect. And it's just like, take a day off, mate. Like, let's do it at 90%, get it out, and then we're on our way. Like, it doesn't have to be 100% or 110% every time. It's just about keeping momentum.
Could you teach? Because I don't think I've been called a perfectionist before, but I don't think I am a perfectionist. And you mentioned, can you tell me a little bit more about what that feels like? Almost so I can compare and go, do I do I have
Yeah.
that? And I'm so
Well,
keen
I
to
guess
hear.
it entails every part of my day, and it's very important to, like, obviously make the distinction. This isn't any sort of form of obsessive nature. It's just my internal dialogue of when I'm waking up. I can, if I have a sleep in till 7:30, I'm like, oof, Georgia, you really sort of slacked off today. And then when we go to getting ready, like, my outfit has to be perfect. Like, what is Chloe going to think about my hot pink suit today? Should I have worn the faux fur coat today? And then, I'm rushing. I mean, this is very pretentious. I'm rushing my little poodle off to daycare, and I'm like, oh, she'll get anxious because she'll be dropped home, so
Yeah.
I'm not being a good enough fur mum. And then it's just constantly like, if my boss puts in a random meeting, I'll be like, shit, what didn't I do? What have I, like, done? What haven't done enough of? And it's not, again, I wouldn't say that's necessarily imposter syndrome. It's just I'm constantly running at a rate of having to be 100% in everything I do. Even on weekends, like when I try a new recipe for the family and dad gives that's interesting, I'm like, well, that was a fucking fail, wasn't it? Never again. So it's like, just, I guess it's constantly striving for an element of success or reward, and not perhaps like just having a bit of a day off in some of those components. Does that
Yeah, no.
give you a little bit of color?
Well, it gives me some. I think you asked the question at the beginning, which was what is enough, and I think you've given a lot of color for that. So thank you so much for answering that so honestly. How are you overcoming this, or is it there every? I'm so interested. Sorry, these are genuine questions
No,
in terms of like.
I mean, I'm not fully there yet. I mean, even looking at who we're lucky enough to sponsor in terms of participants on the pod, reading their rap sheets is just crazy. Like, there's people on UN boards, and I'm here talking about getting my bloody poodle to school. I think it's a constant challenge. I'm still not there yet, and hopefully none of us are fully there yet. But I acknowledge that I am still quite young in my journey and in a very fortunate role for, like you, our age. But it is a constant dialogue that you have to have. And I was even speaking to myself about that, in sort of like, why am I bloody coming onto this podcast when, we've got Melissa Doyle, for goodness sake, on. And it's more about taking time to actually recognize things like, I've become general manager, mid-30s, of Asia Pacific. I've grown it from a team of 5 to 40 in a few years. And I do it fairly autonomously, where I've built an amazing team that are representing Innovid in the region. So I think it's just, again, going back to that kind of cognitive behavioral internal dialogue thing. It's not perfect, and I definitely still have those days where the perfectionist wins, but I think it's a constant learning, and it's building that memory. A bit like good old, our favorite AI at the moment. It's like building on those learnings of, you did do that well, we learned we can be great delivering at that level, and continuing to build on that, I think, is how I'm doing it. And continuing also, I suppose one thing is actually learning to take compliments better and absorb them. I'm terrible, terrible at compliments, really good at cracking a joke at the back of it. And I think that's an element that a perfectionist should take more ownership of, is actually not just listening and acknowledging, but absorbing it and remembering some of those things that your peers and mentors have said.
I love that. We are all the same when it comes to, I'm not going to put everyone in that bucket, but when it comes to
Some
taking
people love a
compliments,
compliment,
it's
Chloe.
it's very, I'm going to say I can relate. Well, just in terms of every woman that has come on this podcast, 90% have said, "Are you sure you want me? I'm honoured to be asked. I can't believe, I'm not as good as all the other guests that you've had on." Every single one, right? So I find that fascinating as a concept in terms of the comparison that we all do. Like you're saying, you're reading the rap sheets going, these people are amazing. They're having the same thought around like, look what she's done in her career, the age she is, the experience she's got. That's so impressive. Like we're constantly comparing. And I just find that fascinating because every woman I ask to be on this podcast, I'm in awe of, right?
Yeah.
And there's a reason they're being asked. And every time I hear, "Oh, you sure you want me?" I've had a couple of people say actually who are very impressive that you would also admire. I don't think I'm good enough. I'm gonna stand out, and not said they said I've loved to, but I don't think I'm good enough. And I'm still on at them. I'm not letting them. I'm not taking no for an answer because I think they're fabulous and I think we'd want to hear from them. You mentioned around. I want to come back to this, like what is enough, because I was having this same debate in my head the other day around, okay, so I get my shellac mani now, I have to get my highlights, which clearly haven't been done based on the camera that's currently on me. Botox, the forehead cannot move anymore.
Yeah.
That is officially something that I will
Great.
not let happen. And I just think all of these things now have become basic necessities for me to feel like I'm enough. And it made me really sad. So I went and got my eyebrows tattooed the other day. And my friend said to me, "Are you excited?" And I said, "No, I'm really sad about it." And she was like, "Why?" I said, "Because I've just added something else to the list where I'm not good enough as I am." And I'll be honest, I've kind of wrestled with this. And for me, I'm like, actually, these things make me happy. I love doing it.
I think, is that it? Like we should actually just take a moment to actually consider what makes us happy. Like if somebody doesn't want to partake in Botox, that's cool and that's for them. But if it makes you happy and makes you feel more powerful and on game and polished, then that's okay.
It made me feel sad. There was an element of me that went, ugh. I don't know if it's because, and I need to have a deeper conversation with myself around this.
As
Like,
to why you did it.
am I being my authentic self? Or am I doing this because society says that this is the bare minimum we now need to do to feel enough? I'm just using your word enough.
Oh, completely.
To feel enough.
Yeah.
And I am grappling with that myself massively. Something else you said reminded me of, I had Anna Thea from UM, CEO of UM on, and I described this moment in the bath around the fact that I said, "Oh, I did a really good job today." And she asked me the question, "Did you feel arrogant when you thought that?" And then, I text my friends and said I did a good job. Anyway, I was listening back to the podcast before it went live and I nearly took it out.
No.
Yeah, I nearly took it out because I had this moment of like complete disgust of like, don't you dare say you're good. And then I had to force myself through that and say, well, no, I am going to say I'm good because my whole point of this podcast is to help other women do it. But for me, who's been going on about this for a year, I think that just that moment of insecurity.
Well, you're putting it in practice.
Yeah, but that moment of insecurity of saying, oh, maybe I should take that out. What are people going to think? Then I regulated and was like, no, I'm absolutely doing it. I can't wait to put that out there. But it goes back to your compliment point, right? We're scared to take compliments and we never give ourselves compliments.
I mean, I definitely thought that as I was saying that I don't think I have a problem with self-belief. I mean, that just sounds horrifically obnoxious. And um, indulgent, doesn't it? But I do stand by it, but obviously I counter that with other challenges I have. But I think the self-belief thing comes from what I have fought through and like persisted through. So I think I do have belief that I'll always be able to try and take that next challenge and next step. It's then up to me to become better at acknowledging that sometimes I might not get it right and I might not need to do it at 120% and still be making strides in my role. So I think we should commit to those things that we say.
Okay. Do you want to commit to it now?
Yeah.
Do you want to say some nice things about yourself on air?
You go first. You say one thing.
Something nice about myself. I'm going to sound really proud of myself. I'm not going to talk about why, but I feel like I was given a situation recently where I had to make a decision of whether I was going to stand up for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I read this really beautiful quote or a book or something, and it said around freedom is the freedom to be disliked.
Mm-hmm.
And as someone who has at their core limiting belief of I always need to be liked, right?
Yeah.
I have it like deep in me. I used to like put being liked at work much more than, being respected. And I had to switch that very quickly because I learned the hard way with that. But I had to make a decision recently on, am I going to stand up for myself and appreciate that some people aren't going to like it? Or am I going to do old behaviours and old patterns and run scared and duck my head? And I've very much lent into the whole, no, I'm doing what I believe in, what I believe is right, what I believe is fair. And I'm extremely proud of myself. And I feel like I've done a good job on it. So
You should
there's
be.
there's a version of me that's like, yeah, I'm promised myself I would be the strongest version of myself. And I feel like I'm creating her, which is really nice.
Well
All right.
done.
Thank
That's
you.
amazing.
Thank you. I'm going to accept the compliment.
Yeah,
Thank you.
You
All right,
are amazing.
you're
Yeah.
up.
Okay, I think I am most proud of myself for being brave and tenacious. I think out here in Asia Pacific, it can be fairly lonely. You don't have peers. Your bosses aren't out here to lean on. And I've always had an ability to just dive in to a challenge. I think really like bringing the brow quite low here, but I think Kris Jenner said, if you hear no, you're speaking to the wrong person. And I think that really is something that I try and stick by, whether it be related to the operations of my team out here or that I personally can't do something. I think I have always displayed that tenacity and perseverance to see something through. So I would give myself a pat on the back for that.
Amazing. Well done. We did it.
Yeah.
I'm hoping anyone listening along is also thinking about what they would say about themselves given that question,
Yeah.
and maybe even a little challenge to people to actually
Send
share
it
it
through.
with someone. Send it in, however you want to do with it. But I think like the more we can get people doing this, like the reason there's such a big, I fundamentally believe from doing as many of these podcast episodes and having as many conversations I've had, that the reason there's such a big pay gap, that the reason that there is underrepresentation in senior leadership with women is driven incredibly hard by the fact that we won't advocate for ourselves, that the fact that we won't say that we're good at stuff, the fact that it's cringe, it's uncomfortable, like you saying you have self-belief, and then you're like, oh, I take it back, and I've got to
actually ask for the pay rise. I've got
to caveat that with, but I've got other flaws,
Yeah.
right? But actually it's around how can we really lean into I'm really good at this, and that's okay to say that. And I think it is going to make some people feel uncomfortable to start with going through that process. But I think we owe it to the next generation to share what we believe we're great in. And I think for children who are growing up today, one of the things my therapist taught me was if my mum said something bad about herself, what I was actually hearing was mum saying something bad about
Mm-hmm.
me, which you just never even think, right, that would be the case. But every time mum would say something negative about herself, I heard it as negative about
Yeah.
me. And I think if we can create parents who are saying beautiful things about
Yeah.
themselves so that children are hearing beautiful things
Mm-hmm.
about themselves, then that inner critic, that imposter syndrome, that noise for the next
Yeah.
generation is going to be so much
Completely.
better.
I've just had that conversation with a few of the team members just about, I mean, it applies to all genders, but we should never presume that people recognize your efforts, your successes, or they know your ambitions in what you want to work towards. So it's incredibly important to find that voice, and you can do it in your own style so you feel a little more comfortable. But it's so incredibly important to make sure that you are overcoming that fear and actually voicing what you've achieved. And even I said to one of the ladies in our team to just keep even a bit of a list of all of her wins throughout the quarter, throughout the year, because quite often you'll remember the shit show, like where you've screwed up one thing over all those wonderful compliments that clients sent through, or where the campaign over delivered and succeeded. We do have that tendency to remember the negative things rather than the positives. So I think that's something I'm trying to instill in my team, is to not presume that you are seen and recognized and people know what you're working towards.
The person that's going to celebrate and advocate for you best is actually
Mm-hmm.
you. We just need
Yeah.
to get comfortable with
Yes.
doing it. Um, let's talk about authenticity. And I want to
Mm-hmm.
bridge the gap here because you made a comment at the beginning of this, which was, I never used to deliver on being authentic.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to hear more about that journey and that switch and how that happened for you.
Well, obviously, with I guess the early years with anxiety and I guess finding myself as a young woman, it's it's hard to be authentic when you don't know your true self, I think, because you don't actually know what you're being authentic about, or what you're sort of articulating about yourself. So I think that's rather difficult to be authentic at that stage personally. I think having gone to, say, for instance, London and joined Flash Talking 12 years ago, I joined, that's really throwing someone in the deep end in a much bigger city, much bigger company. I learned a lot about myself through that whole process of living by myself away from the family. But also, I had really incredible allies and teammates that supported me in creating, a career path, for instance, in terms of where my skill sets lies, celebrating what I was good at and what have you. And not everything went wrong. I definitely cried at Christmas by myself one time. But, you live and you learn through that. But I don't think you could be truly authentic at that stage. Whereas I've, through becoming a more wholesome person, perhaps, into how to put it, I have learnt my true self, and that allows me to be comfortable in putting that forward to my friends, family, and teammates. And that takes practice, as we said, but knowing who you are, knowing your priorities, your, I guess, like ethics and what have you, makes life easier in making hard decisions, in formulating even teams. Like, I've got a big sort of, I guess, prerogative to hire people that are similarly authentic and want one team, one dream, that work hard. And you can't do that unless you have a clear understanding of yourself.
Mm. How do you hold yourself accountable to being authentic?
Oh, that's a really good one. Often it happens before I realize what's coming out of my mouth, if I'm honest. But that's part of the authenticity and charm, is that it's out there, and then let's deal with it. But I do think I am big on reflecting on the day and things that I've said where I have felt disingenuous. Um, Even, like, it's to the extent of, like, I think there's lots of things on the internet, aren't there, Chloe, about as we get older, we're more selective in terms of who we hang out with and our friends. And being authentic is an element of that, is who do we choose to spend time with? And because you're being authentic to yourself, you're not wasting precious time with people who aren't aligned or don't bring worth to, or, don't even, like, shine on you, bring you up, that kind of thing. Like, there's nothing worse than feeling drained after an interaction with someone. So I think that's one element that I try and be accountable with, is sticking with those that sort of hold me up and I can hold them up, all that kind of jazz, but also being honest with yourself and reflecting on how you could be more authentic. I think one big challenge I think we probably had on your list to chat about, but I know I spoke to you about my egg freezing journey. And that was something that, in terms of, like, accountability of being authentic, that was something that I did sort of have that conversation with myself of, like, am I willing to be authentic about this? Would the team be open to me being authentic about this? And ultimately, I decided to be my traditional open self with it, which I'm really proud of, because I think there's a lot of familiarity with, women going through pregnancy. Fortunately, there's more conversations now about trying to get pregnant and the challenges that come with that. But I think there still isn't a great deal of discussion or openness in that pre-journey, particularly for female leaders. You know, Often we have to give up time to make our way to certain levels of leadership that impacts our ability to, I guess, see through some of those journeys, such as motherhood. And so I think it's really important for my team, both the men and women, to be familiar with that, so that they can help other people in their lives through it. They're familiar with it if they themselves want to go through that journey. I think it's really critical. And also, I honestly didn't know how the process was going to impact me, so I thought it was best to give them a little bit of warning. If G comes, like a bull in a china shop into the office, moody as all hell. I mean, they needed their heads up. But I think, yeah, that was a really big one for me, where I questioned the importance of not just authenticity for my own motive, but also, like, the outcome for the team.
Can we talk about the egg freezing? Because I've
Yeah.
signed up for it.
Okay.
I say signed up as if it's some
I
kind
know.
of, like, challenge. But yeah, tell me more.
Well, it is
Fill me.
like a little bit of a marathon. It I didn't. I mean, I think I would have had quite a good experience if I'm honest. It's a short time frame, but it's very, very intensive. So having that openness with work and also friendships was really important. Because it's usually like over a 2-week period. You have to go in for countless scans, blood tests. Throughout those weeks, you're going in every second day at, I think it was like 7 to 8:30, so they could get the blood test to the hospital to be tested for the results by 2:30. And then it went from, a single injection to double injections over a, 10-day, 12-day period. You do start to feel horrifically bloated, sore, and just, a little bit lackluster.
Brilliant. Looking forward to
Yeah,
it.
no, it's a real treat. I did feel quite tired, but mood wise, I was in check.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily for everyone that knows me. Um, but I think it's critical to do the research and consult to find the right um, company. That's probably not the right word, or practice, perhaps is a better word, because I was so fortunate to have a bunch of really supportive nurses and doctors that took me through that journey where you could ask any silly question. They, were just so supportive throughout the process, calling, all of that jazz.
Mm.
But equally, you need to have that support network, because needles in your own stomach is not the most like pleasurable thing. So I
Mm.
know even my parents were away at the time, so I was sending WhatsApp videos to my girlfriends. I'm sure they really loved it, of like the needles going in and what have you. But that was just my way of like having someone in the room,
Mm.
just to be through it. And I think something to think about, I guess, or chat about is a lot of people, like when you say you've done it, they're like, oh, what a great insurance policy. I think we need to realize that it isn't an insurance policy. It's I kind of likened it to a no regret policy. Like, should I meet someone or should I choose to have a child by myself and I need to use it, the eggs that I have frozen are there as a potential mechanism to become a mother, but it's not guaranteed that they're
Mm.
going to work.
Mm.
So, again, I think we just need to make it clear to everyone that it's not a guarantee,
Mm.
um, but it is an important opportunity for us as women, and earlier the better to do it, so that, should we need that support, it's an option to trial for us.
Mm. Yeah. No, I'm hesitant, but I'm doing it. So
Yeah.
thank you for talking so honestly there. And I think for anyone who's listening to this who knows someone who's going through it, just hearing your experiences, like how can you reach out to someone? How can
Mm-hmm.
you just kind of going back to what we were saying around the "Are you okay?" question? It
Yeah.
sounds like something quite extensive that people
Mm-hmm.
have to go through, and just how can we be better at going, okay, that's bigger than just a casual, oh yeah, because of the
Yeah.
way we talk about it, I'm getting my eggs frozen, as
Just
if
whip
it's
them
yeah.
out. Yeah.
Yeah. But it actually sounds like quite a process, so thank you
Yeah.
for being so honest with that, because I think it will help people reach out to people when they need it. We've spoken about support network, and
Mm-hmm.
when you were talking about friends, I actually got a bit emotional because I love my friends so much. I think that how authentic your friends are um means everything. And I think you really realize that in difficult periods of like,
Mm-hmm.
who's there for me?
Yeah.
Who's, and that for me, like I genuinely got quite emotional when you said it, because I think that it is so important. And I feel so sad for anyone that doesn't have that connection
Mm-hmm.
with people. So many people are alone. I think it's like 1 in 4 men are lonely or something
Yeah.
like that. Loneliness is such a huge thing that people are suffering from. If you're not in the right friendship group, or you don't have authentic people around you, or you can't be your most authentic self when you're with people, for anyone listening to this who's kind of having that feeling, what would you say?
It's really challenging. I mean, I feel very fortunate in my current state of life that I have found bunches of friends that
I like the way you
couldn't
just said
be
bunches. It sounded like
bunches.
grapes.
I know. I have my red grapes, my green grapes. No, I have like I've met them through different journeys, right? And some of them are long-term friends from uni, some of them are newer friends from the industry. Um, but it's so critical to find people that are going to uplift you and you can rely on and trust.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, it does take certain bravery, I guess, if someone doesn't have that at present. You have to be willing to step away, from groups that aren't serving you well or relationships that aren't serving you well. But it does also mean you do have to put yourself out there. I haven't personally done it, but I know like a lot of people are using like the Bumble Friendship app, which is a great initiative. But also like going to events and putting yourself out there, if you're invited to things, taking up on that opportunity, because you never know who you're going to meet. But I think it's really critical to find that network. I mean, we've both spoken about our parents, and we're both like acutely close to our parents. Like, I love my mum and dad so much. Everyone in the office knows Irene and Mel. But I think as we get older, and sorry, mum and dad, you become more aware that at some stage they're not going to be there, right? So your network of friends are going to become your family, and particularly like the singles out there, hello, um, those friendship groups become even more imperative, because you do need to have those people to call in an emergency, have a cry to celebrate with, have a wine with, and what have you. So I think it's an important focus area for us all.
And knowing what you described your friends almost like a bunch of grapes to me at the beginning, which made me laugh. I describe my friends as like a pack of crayons, and they're like, it depends what I want to get from each of them. Like, so I know if I need strength, I'll go to Lizzie. If I need safety, I'll go to Bill. If I need to be angry and fired up, I'll go to my friend Chloe. Like, and those that haven't been mentioned are now going to be annoyed because they all listen to this every week. I'm sorry, guys. But it just depends. Knowing the authenticity of your friends as well, and the value of exchange of that relationship in terms of like, what do they bring for you, and what do you bring to them. I've never looked at friendship like that until the last kind of year or so, where I've really kind of started to look at myself and who am I. It's then kind of opened me up to who's around me. And that's why I was so pleased that you brought that up as a concept that I think is something we all need to be thinking about. And how is that, who's around me, and how is that influencing me? Is that making me better? Is that making me feel good? Is that making me happy? So thank you for bringing friendship, because friendship hasn't been brought up on the podcast yet. So I value that. We're out of time, which I'm so out of time. So I've got like 9 million questions that I've written down here. So luckily we're heading for lunch. Thank you so much, Georgia, for coming on. At the end of every podcast, I ask everyone to share their limitless person with me. So I'd love to hear who your limitless person is and why.
I always feel cheesy going for family, but I think I'm going to say my grandma, Shirley. She's no longer with us, but she was a force of nature. She was just remarkable woman. She was vivacious, had a wicked sense of humor, but she was also really remarkable in her career. Post World War II, she took up working at the Japanese embassy in Canberra, which was very, very brave. But, you know, she did that with grace and strength and bravery. I think she was just a great idol for me. That again, you can be vivacious, fun, and what have you, but still be incredibly successful and have a wealth of friends around.
I wish we'd spoke about her earlier, because I now have loads more questions. Georgia, thank you so much. I appreciate you. So excited to have you guys on as sponsors, and looking forward to having many more conversations.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.